The story is often told as if it were simple. One man reached too far, another learned from his mistake. But that explanation is comforting precisely because it avoids something more unsettling: that success and failure, even at the highest levels of power, are rarely about ambition alone. They are about timing, perception, and the invisible limits of what people are prepared to accept, long before they know they are accepting it. Julius Caesar and Augustus ruled over the same civilization, in the same century, drawing from the same military victories and political institutions. One was assassinated in the open, at the height of his authority. The other ruled for decades and reshaped Rome so thoroughly that later generations forgot it had ever been different. It is tempting to say Augustus was wiser, subtler, more patient. Those traits mattered. But they are not enough to explain the outcome. Because Caesar did not fail due to a lack of power. He failed because Rome was not yet ready to understand the form that power was becoming. By the late Roman Republic, the system was already under strain. Expansion had enriched the elite and hollowed out older balances. Military loyalty had shifted away from institutions and toward individuals. Political norms still existed, but they functioned more as rituals than restraints. Everyone sensed the Republic was changing, but no one agreed on what should replace it. Caesar emerged from this environment not as an outsider, but as its most successful product. He understood how to mobilize armies, reward loyalty, and bypass obstruction. His victories abroad translated into influence at home. Each step he took followed precedents already set by others, by generals who had marched on Rome, by politicians who had bent the law in moments of crisis. Nothing Caesar did was entirely new. What was new was the scale and the clarity with which he embodied the shift. When Caesar accepted the title of dictator for life, the gesture carried more weight than its practical meaning. Rome had seen dictators before. Emergency powers were not foreign to the Republic. But permanence changed the signal. It removed the shared illusion that this was still a temporary deviation, still a returnable moment. Caesar ruled openly, visibly, without disguise. His authority no longer needed to pretend it was borrowed. That transparency exposed a contradiction Rome had not resolved. It depended on centralized power to function, yet it had not developed a language that made such power legitimate. The result was not immediate collapse, but cognitive tension. Senators continued to meet. Laws continued to be passed. Rituals continued, but the meaning behind them was eroding. The old system was being asked to coexist with a reality it could not name. Caesar's assassination is often framed as a defense of liberty, but structurally, it was an attempt to reverse a transformation already underway. The conspirators did not restore the Republic. They removed a person while leaving intact the pressures that had elevated him. Rome remained militarized, unequal, and unstable. Authority still flowed through armies, wealth, and personal networks. The contradiction did not disappear, it intensified. Into this uncertainty stepped Octavian, later called Augustus. At first glance, his position was weaker than Caesar's. He lacked military experience. He relied on alliances. His authority was contested. Yet this weakness forced him into a different posture. Where Caesar had acted as a culmination, Augustus acted as an interpreter. Augustus did not present himself as a ruler. He presented himself as a restorer. He spoke the language of tradition even as he reorganized its substance. The Republic, he insisted, still existed. The Senate still mattered. Offices still rotated. The forms remained visible. What changed was how they functioned. Power was redistributed in ways that appeared procedural rather than personal. Authority was fragmented across titles that sounded limited but accumulated influence. No single role looked like kingship, yet together they produced something more durable than any crown. This was not deception in the simple sense. It was adaptation. Augustus understood that Rome resisted overt domination but tolerated gradual redefinition. The system needed continuity of appearance more than continuity of control. Where Caesar had made power legible, Augustus made it ambient. This distinction mattered because legitimacy is not only about force or success. It is about whether a society can narrate what is happening to it without fracturing. Augustus allowed Rome to believe it was choosing stability rather than submitting to rule. Over time, repetition did the rest. Each year that passed without crisis reinforced the arrangement. Each generation that grew up within the new structure experienced it as normal. The memory of alternatives faded. What had once been controversial became assumed. Caesar encountered resistance because he arrived before this process could occur. He stood at the moment when transformation was visible but not yet narratable. Rome could see the change but had no shared story that made it acceptable. Augustus succeeded because he arrived when exhaustion had replaced idealism. After civil wars, betrayals, and uncertainty, Rome valued predictability over principle. The population did not need to believe the Republic was alive. It needed to feel that chaos was over. The difference between the two men was not simply personality, but position within a longer pattern. Caesar represented acceleration. Augustus represented consolidation. Acceleration exposes limits. Consolidation hides them. This pattern repeats across history. Systems rarely collapse when challenged slowly. They fracture when change becomes undeniable before it becomes understandable. People resist not loss of freedom in the abstract, but loss of familiar meaning. Caesar forced Rome to confront what it was becoming. Augustus allowed Rome to drift into it. Even the symbols mattered. Caesar accepted honors that signaled exceptionalism. Statues, titles, public rituals marked him as distinct. Augustus minimized such markers. His image was calm, controlled, almost modest. The message was continuity, not rupture. Over time, this aesthetic restraint shaped perception. Power that announces itself invites evaluation. Power that blends in becomes background. Yet the transformation under Augustus was deeper than anything Caesar achieved. The Senate's authority diminished. The army answered to a single center. Provinces were reorganized. Succession became a matter of planning rather than improvisation. The Republic did not end in a single moment. It dissolved into a structure that no longer needed its name. This raises an uncomfortable question about how political systems actually change. We often imagine turning points as dramatic events, assassinations, declarations, revolutions. But Caesar's death was dramatic and ineffective. Augustus's reforms were quiet and lasting. The effectiveness of change seems inversely related to how clearly it is perceived. When people can name what is happening, they argue. When they cannot, they adapt. This does not mean Augustus was benevolent or Caesar reckless in a moral sense. Such judgments obscure the deeper pattern. Both operated within constraints they did not create. Both responded to pressures that had been building for generations. Rome's expansion made republican governance increasingly impractical. Distance, scale, and inequality demanded centralized coordination. The old system survived on precedent and ritual long after its capacity had eroded. Caesar revealed this mismatch too directly. Augustus absorbed it into a new equilibrium. The Republic fell not because it was overthrown, but because it was outgrown. And here the story turns inward. If legitimacy depends on shared narratives rather than formal structures, then stability is less about rules than about perception. A system persists as long as people can tell themselves a story that makes its contradictions tolerable. When that story breaks, no amount of force can repair it. When a new story quietly forms, resistance fades without needing to be defeated. Caesar challenged Rome's story before it had a replacement. Augustus provided a replacement before Rome realized it needed one. This pattern is not confined to ancient history. It appears whenever institutions survive by redefining themselves without acknowledging the change. It appears when continuity of language masks transformation of function. The unsettling implication is that power does not always triumph by imposing itself. Sometimes it succeeds by lowering the volume, softening the edges, and allowing time to do the work. Which raises a final question. When a system changes slowly enough that it no longer feels like change, at what point does resistance become impossible? Not because it is suppressed, but because it no longer knows what it is resisting. History rarely answers that question clearly. It simply moves on, leaving behind names we remember for different reasons, and structures we inherit without remembering how they began. If this story gave you something to think about, consider subscribing to Timeless Questions. We explore history, philosophy, and the patterns that quietly guide human behavior.